In this tutorial, we're going to review our lights for our final interior. Before we get started, I want to set my render view and my viewport to a color mode that will give me an accurate idea of what this will look like when I'm done rendering. So in order to do that, the first thing I want to do is inside my viewport, I've changed it from raw to sRGB gamma. Now I'm going to change the render view, and that's the final gather button, the one directly to the left of the IPR here, this little blank Hollywood clapboard. And I want this to say raw in the upper right hand corner for the color mode. Now it might say something else, and you can simply click on or off and turn that function off if it were, say, sRGB gamma. But if you want to change this so that you don't have to continually be clicking on and off button, you can go to the Maya preferences. And in the preferences, you're going to choose color management. And then you would change view transform right here to raw and hit save. Now we're ready to proceed. So with our interior, we used a spotlight. It's a good general workhorse of a light that allows us a lot of different features that the other lights don't. I'm going to hit 4 on the keyboard so I can see my wireframe. I know that when I drop a light and then later on cameras that it's going to fall directly at the 0, 0, 0 coordinate vertices in the middle of my viewport. It just makes it easier to take it out once I've introduced it. I'm going to go to Create, Lights, Spotlight. And in the bottom of my document, right inside the floor, there is my spotlight cone. I'll hit W on the keyboard, and my objective now is to get that light up at the top of the room here. It's kind of a general ambient light. So the first thing I want to do is go to Channels. And in the channels, I'm going to either rotate it -90 in X or Z. And now the cone's pointing down. Now at this point, I'd really like to see what I'm dealing with as far as the lights go. So I'm going to go from wireframe, I'll hit 5, then 6, and then 7 will give you an idea of where that light is falling. Now I want this to be in the center of the room, which is kind of where it is now. But I'd like to have this light fill the room itself. So over in the attributes, I'm going to go and I'm going to change the cone angle. You can see that what you'll find here as soon as you open up your attributes is the light icon, the light shape, which will change after we add our penumbra to soften it. And there's the color. I'm going to drop the intensity of this down to about 0.3. And then I'm going to bring the cone angle up. And I guess I'll make it about 80. And then the penumbra angle, I'm going to drag to the extreme right. And you'll see that the number goes to 10. And inside your viewport, the light softens around the edges. Just a quick reminder that +10 with the penumbra softens the edge of your lights and increases the size of the circumference. -10 reduces it and also gives you that softer edge. So it really is something you'll play around with. Now I want this to fill the room, and I want to be able to see the walls as well. I could increase the cone angle, but I can also increase the height of the light in my viewport. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And as I prefaced in class, that I think lighting is probably the hardest part of Maya process. So I'm going to put my camera gate on. I'll go up inside the viewport and directly below the word renderer, you'll see a little box with a blue ball. When I click on that, it gives me that camera gate. I'm going to click on the IPR for a moment. And now I've got a pretty nice muted light filling my interior. I'm going to close out my render window for a moment. And the next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to set this up for Raytrace. That's going to give me my shadows. And more importantly, that's what will give me reflections on glassy surfaces. In my interior, I have a bottle, and then I have a mirror. So anything with a blend that's been intentionally put in as a blend for a texture to reflect other surfaces must be set up so that ray trace appears in lights and in our render settings. So the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to set up the ray trace inside the render settings. And we're going to come back up to those Hollywood clapboards again. Now directly to the right of the IPR is the Hollywood clapboard with the gear. I'm going to click on that. And in my render settings, I'm going to go to these two tabs. One says Common. Directly to the right of it is Maya Software. I'm going to click on Maya Software, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the render window. And under Ray Trace Quality, I'm going to make sure that there's a check mark next to Ray Tracing. Once I've done that, I can close out my render window. Now I'm going to return to my lights. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my orthographic views, and I'll make sure that it's selected. And now I can go to the bottom of the attribute window here on the right, and I'm going to open up shadows, and I'll drag down to the bottom of that menu, and I want to make sure Ray Trace Shadows is checked off there as well. So now if I was to go to my viewport and go to my final gather, not the IPR, if I click on the IPR, the lighting is what I expect it to be, but I'm not getting any shadows or reflections in my mirror surface. So I'll go ahead and I'll click on the final gather button. Now while my render window's up, I can access that through the render window as well. So in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the same icon for the final gather. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And now I'm getting my drop shadows, and there's the reflection on my interior. Now that I have the ray trace set up and I'm starting to get the shadows and reflections, I'm going to refine my renders. And what I'd like to do is isolate the area with the crate and the lamp and the bottle and highlight that and minimize the rest of the room. I'm going to turn off the shadow for the overhead light that I just created. And I'm going to introduce another spotlight. I'll hold down the space bar and create lights, spotlight, and I'll go through kind of the same process here. But with this one, I'm going to point it at an angle other than 90 degrees. I'm going to drag it up into the middle of my room again. And now I'm going to point it so that the light is pointing back towards my still life here. I'm going to T on the keyboard. And what T will do is break our light icon into two elements. The source is the cone. That's where the light's coming, or that's your light bulb if you want to use that metaphor. The target is where the light will point to. So I want this to point down towards my crate and bottle. If I were to hold V on the keyboard, the vertices for my target radiate from a circle now as opposed to the square. And if I drag with my left mouse, I can kind of snap that to where I would like the light to point. I'm going to hit 5, 6, and then 7. And there's the halo, that hard edge circumference of my light. I'm going to give it a quick render with the final gather button. And now I'm starting to get a little bit of a concentration here. I can still see the rest of my room, but it's concentrating in this area. Now we can also see I'm getting reflections in my mirror, and there's the blend on my floor. You can see the crate in that view as well. I'll go over to the attributes. If I don't see it, I can hit Control A, or I can click on the tab on the right hand side. And I'd like to go in and I want to change the penumbra angle. I'm going to make it -10. I think I'll reduce the cone angle a bit. And I'm going to give it another render. You find yourself tweaking and rendering, it's time consuming. But the more time you put into it, the better off your renders will be. And that we'll cover in our next tutorial.